Hello, this is Flights in Asia, and in this video, we'll be heading to South Korea, where 5 years ago, a major move was made in relation to trans-Pacific travel. That is the joint venture between Korean Air and Delta Airlines. This highly promoted partnership between the two SkyTeam carriers was made in response to the changes that was taking place in the aviation industry between Asia and North America. According to both carriers, it's now the top joint venture in terms of trans-Pacific travel. So in this video, we'll look back at the 5 years since the joint venture was announced and started and its impact on trans-Pacific travel. The topic, that is the Delta and Korean Air joint venture, is something that I have previously covered, but for a recap of it, it ties into the history of the presence of Delta in Asia. Following its merger with Northwest Airlines, Delta inherited the latter's previous Tokyo Narita hub. Until the early 2010s, Japan was a major hub between the continents for the airline. However, market changes, especially new aircraft coming in that enabled longer range flights, reduced the need to make connections in a city like Tokyo when traveling between continents. Then the competing airline alliances of Oneworld and Star Alliance boosted their presence in Japan with the joint ventures between United and ANA, and American with Japan Airlines. This left Delta as the odd man out, with no airline partner in the highly lucrative aviation market of Japan. As a result, Delta looked west to Korea as its trans-Pacific hub, and it looked to tie in with its SkyTeam partner Korean Air. Delta and Korean Air would start their joint venture in May of 2019. Delta would shift its Asia base of operations from Tokyo to Seoul. While Delta does operate flights specifically to Tokyo Haneda, its presence in Japan pales in comparison to before. Instead, if you are traveling to Southeast Asia or other parts of Asia from the North American continent with Delta, you'll likely make a connection at Seoul through Korean Air. Fast forward 5 years, and now the network of the two carriers joint venture covers 80 destinations in Asia, specifically in 44 countries, and 290 destinations in the Americas. Since the launch of the joint venture, both Delta and Korean Air reports that the joint venture has served over 7 million passengers. In addition to the reciprocal benefits for both passengers and the airlines, Delta has made a heavy investment in Korea, where at Incheon Airport both airlines can operate 24/7 flight operations and have better flight schedule coordination. This relationship goes much deeper, as recently in the last few years Delta has put in a 10% stake in Korean Air's parent company Hanjin KAL, and with that, Incheon Airport is Delta's main Asia hub, further boosting the role of Incheon as a connecting hub. Despite the COVID-19 pandemic, both Korean Air and Delta reports that at Incheon Airport, there are over 2,000 connecting passengers per day, an increase of over 40% within the last 5 years. So now we get back to the discussion between the joint ventures between Delta and Korean Air, along with the Japan-based ventures of the Oneworld and SkyTeam Airlines. Compared to the Japan-based joint ventures, both the United and ANA and Japan Airlines and Japan and American Airlines joint ventures do take advantage of the two hubs at Tokyo, Narita, and Haneda, and arguably there is more flexibility for the airlines based in Japan. Meanwhile, Delta heavily relies on Incheon Airport, which arguably does lag behind the domestic networks in Japan, especially at both Japan Airlines and ANA's domestic hub at Haneda Airport. Prior to the pandemic in 2019, Japan saw higher passenger traffic numbers compared to Korea. However, Delta can tap into the bigger Asia network of Korean Air. This makes up for the lack of presence of Delta in Southeast Asia, where the airline previously served flights to cities like Bangkok and Manila. Instead, Delta now heavily relies on non-stop flights from the US to Korea, Japan, and also to China. This is in contrast to an airline like United, which has its own flights to Hong Kong, Singapore, and soon will launch its first nonstop flights to Manila, Philippines. While Delta could enter the competition in these nonstop flights to these Asian countries, chances are Delta has looked at the cost and seen it less costly for the transport and maintenance of aircraft away from the United States, along with basing flight attendants and crew in the region. Looking forward, things could get even more interesting and bigger in Korea, as right now there is the situation with the Korean Air and Asiana merger, which is still pending. If approved, it could boost the SkyTeam stronghold of Korea even more. The joint venture partnership between Korean Air and Delta has been heavily marketed, though it has been based out of necessity amid the changing landscape of trans-Pacific travel over the last few decades. Delta was on the losing end of the alliance battleground in Japan, so it has been heavily reliant on partners like Korean Air for expanding its network, especially in Asia. While Delta doesn't operate many direct flights to Asia and within the region, the joint venture with Korean Air has proven to be more efficient for the airline, enabling the airline to expand its presence in Asia without much investment. Being one of the top joint venture partnerships in the region and the world, it leverages the strengths of each of the carriers in the modern global aviation market. 5 years on, what is your take on the Delta Korean Air joint venture? I definitely would love to hear your take, though. In the meantime, this has been Flights in Asia, highlighting the news and updates from the aviation and travel scene in the Asia Pacific. For more of the latest updates, you can check out the website at www.flightsinasia.com. In the meantime, thank you for watching and have a great day.